Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
There's some incredible TV coming out of the UK right now. Brits just do it differently. The accents, the wit, the scenery, the devastating one-liners disguised as compliments. It's all streaming on BritBox. They have the best mysteries, dramas, comedies, and seriously addicting originals like Outrageous, based on the true story of the Mitford sisters. They were kind of like the Kardashians of the 1930s, wealthy, audacious, chaotic, wildly opinionated, and always making headlines. And chances are you've never heard their story. It's stunning. It's jaw-dropping. It's very British. So check out Outrageous. It could be your next favorite. Don't miss Outrageous, streaming now only on BritBox.
Craving your next action-packed adventure? Audible delivers thrills of every kind on your command, like Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, where a lone astronaut must save humanity from extinction, narrated with stunning intensity by Ray Porter. From electrifying suspense and daring quest to spine-tingling horror and romance in far-off realms, unleash your adventurous side with gripping titles that'll keep you guessing. Discover exclusive Audible originals, hotly anticipated new releases, and must-listen bestsellers that hook you from the first minute. Because Audible knows there's no greater thrill than the one that speaks to you. Discover what lies beyond the edge of your seat. Start your free 30-day trial at audible.com/WonderyUS. That's audible.com/WonderyUS.
It's a tough question to answer because really, I guess I just want my mom, but it's not in the terms of just having her home. Like, what I want out of this is something that is never going to be obtainable. Like, I want to know her. I want to know who she was, and I'll never get that chance to know who she was. I get fragments from people, and that's about it. So I don't know what I want from this. Answers would be nice, but seems like we're jumping through hoops to get those from police even. So yeah, I don't closure maybe. I just want to know who she was.
That's Samm Holt, the daughter of Dawn Michelle Holt, a 20-year-old who went missing in Waldorf, Maryland in 1996.
I wanted justice. At this point, I've talked to my mom. I know what other people are going. And we're never really going to get the truth. I just want to bring my sister home. I want to bring her home so that her children, my mom, and the rest of my family can have some closure. At this point, 29 years later, I don't even think the rest of it matters anymore. Just tell us where she is. Let us bring her home. Let us bury her. Let us have a chance to say goodbye.
That's Sherri Shelton, Dawn's sister. This is the Silver Linings Handbook podcast. I'm Jason Blair. This is the second of 2 episodes with Sherri and with Samm. In this episode, we're going to be joined by their advocate, Raul Montero, who's going to help us walk through the case. If you haven't had the chance to listen to the first episode, I recommend you go back at some point and listen. A little more than 26 years ago, 20-year-old Dawn Michelle Holt moved to Florida at the suggestion of her mother to get away from some acquaintances who were involved in using and distributing drugs. But just weeks later, Dawn returned home and was last seen at a motel in Waldorf. She had told her estranged husband that she was on her way to see him and her 2 young children. That was April 25th, 1996. Dawn hasn't been seen since. From time to time, Dawn had disappeared before, so it took 8 weeks for her to be reported missing after she hadn't shown up anywhere in Maryland or Florida. The police were able to track her to the motel, and they had begun to suspect that she had come back to Maryland both to see her children and also some of her acquaintances who were involved in drugs. Dawn grew up in St. Mary's County, Maryland. It's the southernmost part of Maryland's Western Shore on the Chesapeake Bay. At the time Dawn disappeared, it was a rural community. Since it's almost doubled in its population. When Dawn was 12 years old in 1989, her father had been beaten to death by 5 police officers in Howard County, Maryland. That experience, according to family members, traumatized Dawn, and she began to have problems at home that eventually led her to being placed in a group home where she struggled and eventually ran away. After getting married, Dawn began to appear noticeably unstable to family members. People who knew her said that she turned to drugs and was increasingly seen with armed men. Her family became distanced from her, and after several interactions with law enforcement, including one incident where she and a man who was her boyfriend at that time were shot at, Dawn, according to some, became a confidential informant for the police. Upon her return, Dawn was reportedly seen at the motel by a witness, but later the family would find out that she was also seen at a party where the one witness they were able to find said something went terribly wrong. For more than 2 decades, Dawn's sister, Sherri Shelton, and Dawn's daughter, Samm Holt, have been searching for answers to what happened to Dawn that night. And along the way, they've experienced many of the struggles of families who find themselves involved in the ambiguous grief of having a loved one who becomes missing and difficulties working with the police to get answers. After discussing Sherri and Samm's experience in Dawn's life in our first episode, Raul's joining us to dive deeper into the case. We'll continue our conversation on the ambiguous grief, the difficulties that the family are facing, and where the investigation stands now, and what we can learn from the experience of this family. Hey, Raul, thank you for joining us this week for the second part of our conversation. And Samantha, Sherri, thanks for sharing everything last week about Dawn and about growing up. A lot of that, to me, a lot of that's really intensely emotional. And like I said last week, I just really appreciate the willingness to be vulnerable. And I hope that, this will both bring some attention to Dawn's case and to your mom's case, Samm, but also give people who are struggling with similar things some ideas or some things that they can sort of grow through to kind of reconcile the experience. But I was mentioning Raul, and Raul is the one who originally suggested that I talk to you guys. And, we've worked together. He's been on the show before to talk about the Long Island serial killer case. And the particular topic that we focused on there was this notion of marginalized victims. A very common thing that in sort of like criminal justice circles and the news media and the true crime community is this concept of sort of like missing white woman syndrome. And it's this idea that the media tends to cover cases, think Natalie Holloway, Gabby Petito, blonde, attractive women who, have a certain kind of look or have a certain kind of middle class background. But I've always felt that doesn't fully capture it. Because if you are a conventionally attractive blonde white woman in Appalachia who's poor, or that there's the words drug abuse in your backstory or mental illness, those stories also don't get coverage. And I think Dawn's case really illustrates that well. So Raul, let me start by letting you kick off just sort of how you came across this case, became interested in it, and a little bit about what work you guys are doing now.
Hey, Jason, thanks so much. And thanks for providing a platform for Samm and Sherri to talk about Dawn. Dawn is very special. And much to what you were saying, that marginalized for whatever reason is dehumanizing and it's unfair. And people like me, we want to stand up and be the voices for those that have limited ability to speak for themselves. And in Dawn's case, she's been missing almost 30 years. And, if it weren't for what I would consider a small army, Dawn still would be relegated to, the dark, empty places of NamUs or the Charlie Project. So Dawn came under, I became aware of Dawn, interestingly enough, in one of the Long Island serial killer Facebook groups run by an incredible advocate, an incredible researcher named Jeannie. And she's just so important to me, Jeannie is, and her work and her ethical approach to victims and protection of the families. And we have had a fast friendship that is truly one of the better friendships in my entire life's history. Jeannie had done a write-up on Dawn while we were looking for who Fire Island Jane Doe might be.
And that's one of the cases that gets intertwined with the Long Island serial killer case, right? It was like in the 90s. There was, am I right? Because there's so many. Is that the torso or that was found?
Legs of Fire Island Jane Doe
right.
were found on Fire Island in 1996. And when looking for unidentified, you naturally search missing people. And Dawn's case came up during that research. The timeline was slightly off, but when you're going by what NamUs says or Charlie Project,
those are databases
Yeah.
for missing persons.
Right. You can't always go by what's in there because there are errors here and there. So considering Dawn as a possible Fire Island Jane Doe candidate, we had to overqualify the dates of Dawn's missing date. So that's how I first became aware of Dawn. And a year or two goes by, I've created this map of missing, murdered, and unidentified. And, over the course of the growth of my advocacy related to the map, my circle gotten bigger with more advocates, in my sphere and people that I learned from and could bounce thoughts and ideas off of. And I realized that my circle was rather vast from where I began. And I figured, let me try one more time to, bring on what I would consider a heavyweight advocate to see if they can assist. And that was with Light the Way. And I reached out to Shayna from Light the Way and talked about Dawn. And Shayna gave me incredible advice, but where I had intended to sort of hand the case, if you will, to Light the Way, Shayna said, you can do this. you already have the empathy and the passion, and you care. So try it, do it, and we'll be here to guide you. So Jeannie and I got on a
And Light
call.
the Way is advocacy group.
Yes, Light the Way is the Light the Way Missing Persons Advocacy Project. And they just do incredible work. We have 29 families now under the Light the Way umbrella, and Dawn is a part of that Light the Way
So
family.
those are cases that are being focused on.
Correct.
The family.
Yes.
Okay.
And Light the Way recently joined forces with the Gabby Petito
I
Foundation.
saw that.
Yes, and it's super exciting, and just the much more broad platform that these two advocacy groups have, and the work that each do is so profoundly vast.
And I just want to shout out for Gabby's 4 parents, right?
Yes.
Her step parents and her real
Mhm.
parents, who are really just Gabby's parents, because probably no force that I've seen within advocacy for victims has done more than those 4 people for marginalized victims in recent years. And to take, in the middle of their grief, to take their platform that they've been given by the media, to take that and turn that to help all these other people who wouldn't otherwise get the attention, that is like an act of empathy, love, and grace that I think people like but I don't think we step back sometimes in looking at Gabby's case to think, wow, these people and all their suffering and all their hurt have turned their suffering into absolute love.
Yeah, I mean, Nikki says it herself.
That's Gabby's
They're-
mom, biological
Yes,
mom.
they're all Gabby, meaning all missing people are Gabby, regardless of race or orientation, um, religious denomination. They're all Gabby. Gabby just happened to be blonde hair, blue eyed, and of course the mainstream media
And middle class and
Yeah.
all these other things, and not a drug addict. And
Right, and it gains so much attention, and these people could have just retreated back into their private lives and
they would have had every right to.
right, and find a path forward for their own healing, but they actioned their grief. They turned it into forward progress, and each one of the 4 parents do unique things for all people that are missing. So it's a wonderful partnership. It's really interactive. It is symbiotic and beautiful, and I'm blessed to be a part of both of those organizations. It's truly an honor for me. But go ahead.
Oh no.
I think when I got the advice from Light the Way to sort of manage or advocate, which was such a big word. I never wanted that title. I never felt I could live up to a title as an advocate. I was almost embarrassed to call myself an advocate. But I took the advice that Shayna gave me, and Jeannie and I got on a call with Sherri, and I mean, I'm easily moved by people. I have an overabundance of empathy, but talking with Sherri for the first time, it broke me down. It really like uncovered a whole lot of emotion in me, and while uncovering all that emotion, it ignited something inside of me. It in a way, it pulled me very close to Dawn. It pulled me certainly close to Sherri. And then over the course of a few other conversations, it pulled me close to Samm. It's led me to be close to Justin, and it gave me it gave me the motivation to figure out what we can do. What can I do as one singular advocate? I still grind my teeth when I say that, but I got the motivation to do it because I cared so much.
I think you
And
can officially call yourself an advocate somewhere around the thousands of names of missing people that you've put on maps and unidentified people in the advocacy in the Long Island serial killer case in this one. But I was going to ask you something.
Yeah.
You have the Long Island serial killer case with an untold number of victims, you know. What is it, 7 charges right now, many more that seem clearly linked to it, and many, many more that are suspected. So you've got all that. You're putting together a map of every missing and unidentified person in the United States. It's catch list map. And then there's this case, right? Because you could spend all your time looking into Long Island or all your time on the map. Then there's this case in Maryland that kind of grabbed you. And so I'm just curious, Raul, what was it about this case that grabbed you?
I think I felt mad. I think that's the first emotion I felt. I felt anger. I felt anger that the only 2 images of Dawn were, one was a blurry black and white photo that there was almost indistinguishable. You couldn't define any of Dawn's characteristics. And then the other one was yet another grainy, blurry, colorized photo, but again, it just didn't do justice, and it bothered me. And listening to Sherri talk to me that first night about Dawn and what Sherri believed happened to Dawn and Dawn's life, it you get this compulsion inside that you can't fight. And I didn't really make any attempt to fight it off or, push. And I hate saying the case because this is a person's life, but to push back to like light the way or another advocacy group, I just suddenly believed in myself that, yes, I can come up with this action plan, which I literally wrote that night. And I believed that there were things that we could do and things that we can put out there. We can rewrite the false narratives that are out there about Dawn. We can get Dawn's truth out there, the good, the bad, the ugly, because as human beings, we're all perfectly imperfect. So Dawn deserved that. And it may not have been my right to suddenly stand up for Dawn, but but Sherri believed in me, and
That's
that was more than
interesting.
enough.
It's interesting you say that because I can't think of it as like, I mean, when do we not have a right to stand up for another human being?
Yes, in our sphere, it can get ethically touchy, and you never want to.
I don't know if it's
I mean,
ethically
posting a
touchy.
flyer.
I think what it can become is territorial, which I tend to think is actually the opposite of ethical, becomes unethical, right? Like you, we're all humans trying to help other humans.
Yeah.
And I don't think we should, if somebody is being harmful, if someone's hurting a case, if someone's doing damage, sure, but why are we gatekeeping people out of the helping business? I wanted to ask Sherri something. Raul mentioned that first call with you, and I wanted to ask you what it was like to get that first call from Raul, and where were you in your own investigation at that point?
It was actually quite a shock. 'Cause I had been working on this for so long. And Jan reached out to me And then she sent me to Suzanne in New York, who produces the missing show. And she's like, I can't help you up here. Let me hook you up with somebody. And Jan knows him. Then I got this call from Raul. I was like, okay. I cried the entire time he was talking to me because all the years I've been fighting for my sister, finally, somebody reached out to me. And Raul has been amazing. With all of us working together, we've gotten so much done. And now he's brought you in too. And I'm sitting here crying now because this is awesome. I have fought for so many years to bring my sister to light. And Raul has been so incredible. He has talked to my family members, especially Justin, which is a hard case to deal with. But he's done so much. And I still cry. Every time I talk to him, I still cry. He's incredible.
It's awesome that it had that impact on you, and it was kind of sounds like it was just what you needed. Samm, I wanted to ask you sort of a similar thing. I know for you, this entire thing started when you were very young and you had to grow up finding out about your mom. And you had mentioned before that, until you were sort of like in your early 20s or your teens, you were still angry.
Yes, she was.
Yeah. And
She hated me.
And what was it like for you to experience people having interest in your mom's case and her life?
It wasn't a bad feeling. It was actually surprising. Sherri had reached out to me asking me if I had any pictures of my mom, and I was like, yeah, I got pictures. And after I sent them over to her, she said that she had found these two people that really wanted to help and wanted to know if I wanted to be a part of it or if there's anything I wanted to add. And I'd never had anybody that wanted to stand up for mom in this way. Like, yes, Sherri did, but when I first found out Sherri was trying to do this back in, 2011, 2012, 13, around there. Like she said, I was angry. I I said very choice things to her about it. And when you were saying that people can become very territorial, you're absolutely correct. That's how my dad, my brother, and I became about her case. We became very territorial. Um, we didn't like other people speaking in on it because we felt like, well, you weren't here all this time. Why are you coming now?
Mm.
But that was when I was angry. When this came upon, I was welcoming. I was very happy that she had found somebody that cared, and not only that, not just somebody, but two people that really seemed to care, and really wanted to do something. And not only that, but she found people that knew what to do. We had no idea at all. Any of the steps, like the FOIL request, all that, the asking for the files and trying to reach out more to the police and setting up a better page on Facebook for her, because I would share her missing pages every year and speak about her and people would share it for me, but actually making something dedicated to her, that was all them, and we never thought of that. We never would have thought of that. So they brought so much attention to her in such a short period of time. Like, it was so quick. So quick. And the amount of people that are actually following her page and I can't figure the word for it right now, but they're, engaging in it and they're helping. And that's huge.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Now, I know that Sherri, you moved back to Maryland, was it 2009?
Yes.
And you started looking into the case, and you had said, as we were talking before, you had said that, like, one of the things that you sort of felt was one of the many motivators. One was coming back to the area, but one was feeling like you had been ignored. What did you mean by that?
Because I was calling the La Plata police, the Waldorf police, St. Mary's County police, and I was getting nowhere. And I just kept calling and calling. And finally, I got the cold case unit, and they're like, "Oh, your sister Dawn." Like, yeah. I'm like, "Oh, well, she's a cold case. Why? Why is she a cold case?" And they're like, "Okay, well, hold on." And then that's when I got Tina Becker in it.
Who's that?
She was part of the cold case unit. She's the lady that I gave, because prior to calling her, I had taken pictures of the house that I think Raul had mentioned earlier, of where we thought my sister was buried. Unfortunately, it's not where she was buried. They eventually went and checked it out, but nobody did nothing. They kept blowing me up, blowing me up, blowing me up. Nobody wanted to do nothing. I'm like, "Oh, she was a druggie. She had a record. Don't care." And it wasn't till I actually moved back down here, and like I said, every birthday, every anniversary, I posted. And then GN reached out to me, and then all this has happened.
Yeah.
My sister's not just a freaking druggie. She's not just an informant. She is somebody that was trying to change her life and do the right thing. And she loved her kids. And she's gone. And there's people out there. There's people in St. Mary's County. They know. There's people in Waldorf in Maryland. They know. But nobody wants to talk.
So when you guys eventually connected, it sounds like you worked on sort of like a strategy to try and deal with and tackle some of those challenges. And you both mentioned like that not only was it nice in that moment to have someone who cared about Dawn or was interested in Dawn, but also people who knew what to do. Right. I was going to ask you, Raul, in that context, what was the strategy that you guys applied?
So the first one was to reach out to law enforcement, in a nice way, introduce myself, clarify that I am representing the family of Dawn Michelle Holt with the family's permission for this outreach. I included Sherri's name, Samantha's name, contact information, etc. And I was just really looking for who the lead detective might be. There was none at the time.
Did you introduce yourself as Raul, I'm not really an advocate?
No, I actually had.
And in all seriousness, how do you do that? Like, if you want to advocate, how do you, you're an outsider who's not involved in the case. How do you make the pitch to the police?
I mean, it can be nerve-wracking. Someone like me who it can be a bit of a wordsmith when I'm on a keyboard, but you want to. Your first impression is fundamental to law enforcement. And, at that time, I did not have light the way other than a volunteer at that point. So I did say that I was an independent researcher, an advocate, and a volunteer with the Light the Way Missing Person Advocacy Project. I wanted to establish a line of communication. I wanted to have a point of contact, not only for myself, but for Sherri and for Samm. And I was surprised to have gotten a response quite quickly within about 15 minutes or so. And it went from, one person to another to a third person before it went to Sergeant Chris Taylor. He ultimately and still has the case. He's the lead investigator on the case. But at the same time, I was reaching out, establishing a line of communication. I was also submitting Freedom of Information requests with the state of Maryland. I, of course, asked for the entire case files. I wanted any videos, recordings, suspect lists, things that I know I'm never, ever going to get. But you have to go for everything, and hopefully you settle somewhere in the middle. Within a matter of a couple of days of my submission of the Freedom of Information request, the state police had to respond. And it was at that point that Sergeant Chris Taylor came on the scene and began engaging with us, which was a great thing. That was a huge success.
He's from the
state police.
State police cold
Yeah.
case. Okay.
Yep. And that was a huge thing because that was the first big goal that we had, which was to have a point of contact. And there were some text messages and phone calls between Sergeant Taylor and Sherri, which was impactful and important. And Sergeant Taylor actually agreed to get on a Google's Meet call where we were on video with him. We all introduced ourselves and just outlined what the agenda was. So from an advocacy standpoint, establishing point of contact, I received all of the pictures.
And I know this isn't always fair, but I've heard cops tell me this. Like being able to engage, particularly on a cold case with a victim's family member, really brings the case alive for them. Was that part of the goal, like making Dawn a real person to them?
Yes. One, because Dawn was a real person. And two, Sherri's a very emotional person. And you hope that you get a law enforcement officer that has sensitivities to that. And based on the text messages Sherri sent me, he was that type of officer. And that was just, in a way...
What do you mean by that? The sensitivities, her being an emotional person?
He engaged. He could have, disassociated himself and kept it wholly professional. Not that
he was empathetic.
He was empathetic, and that was super, super important to me, because it was important for Sherri and it was important for Samm, and Dawn deserved all of this. And it was really wonderful that he did engage with Sherri. He called her, he spoke to her from his kid's baseball game. So he relegated private time off the clock for her. And that was very important.
I was going to ask Samm and Sherri, just sort of like jumping backwards a little bit. One of the most important things, we talked about in the last episode, how often we don't talk about what the person was like in life and how it's really important to honor them and make them sort of human to people who didn't know them. But another thing law enforcement will often say is if you're trying to solve a crime, it's kind of like a three-legged stool. One is you have the crime scene. And then two, you have the victim and their victimology, their history, who they are essentially as a person. And if you have the crime scene and the victim, it becomes easier to figure out kind of what the profile of a suspect is or what the suspect is like. But in disappearances, who the victim was becomes more important because you often don't really know whether you have the crime scene. And and so just curious from my perspective, what we talked a little bit about this before about what her life was like, but what do we know about the people that she was spending time with at the time she disappeared?
Very high up the drug scene, like millionaires pretty much when it came to selling drugs. And she was surrounded by it. Like, it wasn't just the Somervilles, it was the Dickersons, it was the Bushes. There's a lot of names in St. Mary's County where they were all in drugs. They were all selling it. And then you also had the assistant district's attorney. You had the head of narcotics that was also in the drug scene dealing the drugs. So she was surrounded by a lot of bad people. And it just kept getting worse for her.
Sherri, do you remember any of those people?
I do. Um, I remember it actually started prior to her meeting the Somervilles. I remember calling me one night, freaking out because I guess she was having a bad trip on acid. And when I rescued her, she's like, "I'm never doing this again. I'm never doing this again." And then she got married. I was at her wedding, and she was so happy. She found the love of her life. After that, I don't know where it went bad again. Dawn she had a heart of gold. I mean, granted, she was kind of silly in the brain. I mean, I don't know if they told you. She'd ask questions like, if I dye my hair, is the baby going to come out with that hair color? If I get a perm, is my baby going to come out with curly hair? And she was funny. Like, she actually acted like a true blonde. But she had a heart of gold. She had a heart of gold.
Mentally, though, she had traumas that she didn't get to work through.
Right.
No, she didn't. My dad being basically murdered. Our dad.
But then you
Right.
also have the addiction already running in the family because her father was also, or their father was also an addict.
He was.
So that also just passed down, and she handled her trauma with drugs. And I hate to say it, but sex. She did it with that too. So
Unfortunately, Sam, you are correct.
yeah, she was trying to fill some kind of hole that she couldn't figure out how to fill.
Right.
And I'm not sure
Right.
why, though. I'm honestly,
Again, she was traumatized.
well,
and
we have to go back to, and I hate to say this, we have to go back to the abuse
yeah,
we had in the house.
exactly. And that came right after losing her dad. So she had a lot of things that led to where she ended up mentally.
You know what it reminds me of something that I don't know if you guys are familiar with that concept of trauma bonds. Like, the idea that like when people go through traumatic events, um they're seeking to, like you were describing, Sam, fill a hole inside them, and they gravitate to things. And you can almost have a trauma bond with drugs, but it
Yes.
could be men, it could be women, it could be friends, it could be whatever it is.
It could
And
just be adrenaline.
yeah, right. Yeah. All
Yeah.
sorts of things you can become addicted to. And and part of what you're doing in that moment is you're trying to heal this kind of disconnection you feel, but because it's unhealthy relationships, whether it's an unhealthy relationship with drugs or an unhealthy relationship with a person, it actually widens your emotional disconnects, making the thing that you're sort of literally having, ironically, the opposite effect of what you're looking
Yes.
for.
Exactly. 100%.
It's sort of, I think, like the way that you guys are describing this, it's almost like the medicine that she was taking to heal whatever it was actually her poison.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
She was looking for somebody to help her.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I also wanted to ask you guys about, once you connected with the Maryland State Police and the investigators, were you able to make any progress on the case?
No, not really. I mean, we make progress in our own little circle, but it's not even so much as progress. We're just filling in blanks that have been left blank for the longest time. And they're like most Sherry knows a bit more than most of us, but everybody else is learning as I'm learning pretty much.
I fought with Maryland State Police for many years, and it wasn't until I was in Maryland, it was like 2013, that I got a hold of Tina Becker, and they came out to the house and they took everything I had, and then they disappeared. And I tried and I tried and I tried. I got nothing. I came back down here, kept trying. I kept getting some, well, nobody would tell me nothing. They're like, oh, well, we don't have that. We don't have that case. It wasn't until Deanne, Raul, and Suzanne came in that we actually started getting answers.
Here's my thing with Chris now.
That's the investigator.
Yes.
Yes.
While we have spoken to him, we've gotten at least one Zoom meeting call. We've had multiple postponed. What I don't understand is that we've had so many pushbacks because we'll have another case come in. We'll have some shooting in Maryland that he's got to cover. But why is he working new cases and cold case? That's what doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, he did. Hold on. He did actually say that Dawn's case is now inactive.
Well, no, because when you asked him last week, the first question was, what is Dawn's case listed as? And he said, cold case missing person.
Oh, wait, hold on.
So
Let me get my book.
Active. So I'm wondering why he's on cold case, but he's also dealing with all these other things because.
Yeah, how did he go from active back to cold case?
Exactly. And then on top of that, he finally reached out to my dad.
Did he?
Well, months ago, remember? He called him. My dad called him back, and he never called him back because he said that he was handling the shooting that had just happened in Cecil County. And then months go by, and he still has not reached out to my dad. And then he said that he wanted to have an in-person meeting a week ago when you talked to him, and 2 to 3 weeks with my dad. But yet he still has not reached back out to him to speak to him about any of this.
Well, Smith, I think probably, and Raul might have some thoughts on this, about what we see in a broader perspective. There are cold case units and cold case detectives, but very rarely is their full-time job cool. And I think part of the problem is like we don't dedicate enough resources to it. Like you've probably seen that TV show, The First 48 Hours, or heard about it. But yeah, and cops will tell you, like, if I can solve a case in the first 24 to 48 hours, it's going to go down fast. Anything longer than that, it's not like in a week. It's like once you get to a week or 2 weeks, you're talking long time. And then what happens is you get another case within the 48 hours, and if you don't devote your time to that, you're going to miss the opportunity to solve it. So essentially, all the warm cases start to take priority, and you don't get the time and the energy. And that's, I think that some states are really rethinking the way they do it. Raul, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that like a murder or a shooting will gain like top priority and all hands on deck will be called, and like what you're saying, it gets pushed to the side a little bit. The issue that we have is that Dawn's been pushed to the side right now 29 years, and that's unacceptable. And at some point in time, you have to do a little bit more. Now, I will say that Sergeant Taylor did live up to his promise once we provided the coordinates of the house where we believe Dawn to have been buried. He claims he did go there. He got funding for 2 ground penetrating radars and their operators, and he had cadaver dogs. He noticed within moments that there was an anomaly too small to be human, so he's told, and so we're told. Dawn isn't there, at least according to all of that. Now, that's a great thing that he did execute and take care of and lived up to, but that also coincided with the end of the appeal process for the FOIL requests, and then
What do you mean by that? What's the relevance of that?
Well, because then the state isn't obligated to engage with me any longer. So you file a FOIL request, it gets
That's
denied.
a Freedom of Information Act,
Right.
which is like the public law that gives you access to public records, and so and usually when there's an open investigation, you're even more limited than normal, right? In terms of what you can get.
You're very limited. The fact that Dawn was a CI really just puts like lava on the case because they won't discuss that whatsoever. Now, during the appeal through Maryland's ombudsman process, I was willing to negotiate, if you will, access to certain files. I knew I would never get anything related to Dawn being a confidential informant. I wasn't looking for that. It would have been great to have it, but I knew I wouldn't get that. You have to be realistic. And I asked for several different things that were sort of a step back, if you will. We asked to have Samantha even alone, or I would come down there to Maryland with her and review the case files, visually, what we'd be able to view. We understood that there'd be redactions. We tried to make every accommodation. Then there was the case of the missing files that Sherri submitted to Sergeant Tina Baker, who retired and took those files. They're not in the 3 filing cabinets worth of case files on Dawn's case, which is incredibly frustrating to somebody like me, and I'm sure to the family. So we kept pushing Sergeant Taylor to communicate with Tina Becker to get those files back. And I don't want to use the word obfuscation, but there was a certain measure of stonewalling, if I'm being honest. And, as much as I want to keep amicable with law enforcement because it's bigger than me being pissed off. It's about the family's contact.
It's a delicate balance, right?
Yeah, it's a super delicate balance, but there's only so much you can take with the stonewalling. And for me, it coincided with the appeal process expiring, which was in November, middle end of November, which brought into the holidays. Chris asked us to reach out to him the 3rd week of January, which we did on that exact day. And we didn't get answers for weeks. And that became incredibly frustrating. And Jason, you know me, that's the kind of thing that activates me on a way that, like the way doesn't prefer me to be. It takes me back to my Suffolk County fights.
So, Raul, where's the case now?
So Dawn's case is still listed as a missing person case. I can't say that it's a cold case anymore because there have been investigative measures that have progressed the case somewhat. There are persons of interest that are still to be talked with, not only from our perspective but from law enforcement's perspective. As far as Dawn's the case files that Tina Becker had taken when she retired, one of the questions I had Sherri ask Sergeant Taylor last week was about Sergeant Tina Becker yet again, and if he had been able to communicate with Tina, because that had seemed
And
to
get the case file.
yeah, it seemed to have been an issue for him. And in my question that I asked Sherri to ask, it to paraphrase it, just said, "Is there an update on Tina Becker? We're considering reaching out to her ourselves." Now that you know that's sort of an implied threat that I'm going to meddle my nose in where they may not want it to be, and I don't really care.
I don't think it's an implied threat, but go on.
Um,
I don't know what your idea of implied is,
I mean,
but it's a pretty
you know
clear
me,
one to me,
so
right?
yeah.
I mean,
But you know me, so you're Jason.
no. I just live in this world and I know what that means.
Right. So Sergeant Taylor's initial reaction was don't do that, to back off. And then later through the conversation him and Sherri were having, he did an about face on that and said go for it. So Tina is going to be being communicated to by me, and so are some other people that I just need to ensure that they've been reached out to and that there have been conversations. And if they have any type of information whatsoever, to share it, or if they have an adverse reaction to me reaching out or anyone else reaching out to them, that's going to be noted as well. And it'll all be shared ultimately with Sergeant Taylor because he's the legal investigative arm of this. So it's important that, and Jason, how many families that you've spoken to, the families themselves do most of the work on a cold, unresolved case.
Yeah.
And if that's what
And
it
it's
takes,
hard.
then if that's what it's going to take, then that's what it's going to take. And I'm certainly not intimidated to do that. And I think that's just something that's going to have to be part of, the advocacy plan going forward. So people will be reached out to. It'll all be documented. If there are any verbal conversations with their permission, it'll be recorded. And it'll be shared where it needs to be shared. And in-person events are something we're looking at doing this summer in the area where Dawn was last seen and her known locations, because we know that there are people in that world still living there. And, we want to ensure the family's safety, of course, in doing that. But it's important that people see that Dawn has not gone away, that Dawn is not going to be forgotten about. And, from my perspective, like I put out there today, Dawn to me is like family. So Dawn's fight is my fight, and I'm not going to stop. So there are a lot of things that we do have planned. This podcast is certainly a huge opportunity for us. So again, thank you for that. Our plans are, and there are other cases that have, decades long stonewalling. You look at Lonnie's Law for Lenine Rogers. There's a petition in that state that after 20 years with no progress in a case, that the case files get turned over to the families. There's another case like that. Same thing with, cases like Maura Murray. And we want that for Dawn's case as well. So there'll be a change.org petition that we're going to publish on the 21st of May, which is Dawn's 50th birthday. So, that there's a complete awareness program. We're working with several billboard companies to hopefully gain funding for billboards in the La Plata, in the Mechanicsville, in the Waldorf area, and then more and more media coverage. So there was someone on we have a Facebook page, Justice for Dawn Michelle Holt, and some a news outlet had posted or basically regurgitated a lot of information that most of it was incorrect about Dawn. And I communicated with that reporter, and we're still working on setting up a conversation on that. So
to try and maybe get a better story or more accurate or
and more
corrections.
contemporary outlets for her, because, Dawn deserves everything we can throw at the world, and I'm here all day for that.
I wanted to jump back. You were saying, and that point is very true. Like, we know when cases like this get sustained media coverage, or any media coverage kicks up a hornet's nest, inevitably tips, someone senior in law enforcement pays attention. It could do all sorts of things. Sometimes really good, sometimes, plenty of rumors and other stuff like that can be distracting, but it tends to be usually better than nothing.
And nothing.
But it brings me to the question that I wanted to close by asking all of you guys, and I'll start with you, Raul. Like, what is your hope for the case, and what do you think other people, whether they're in Maryland or they're other places or they're in law enforcement or whatever, what do you think other people can do to have an impact?
So my hope is very simple, and it's something Sherri coined. It's a hashtag, bring her home now. I would love nothing more than to bring Dawn home. Dawn's mom, Phyllis, when I was finally able to communicate with her, because the families are shattered. They have now generational loss that they're struggling to work through, and for Dawn's mom to reply to my outreach was incredibly moving for me. And her own words were, she doesn't care who gets charged or not. They just want Dawn to come home. They want to bring her home. And how many families say the same thing on long-term unresolved cases? Because it's their loved one that they miss. It's their loved one that they want home. Justice is for law enforcement to deliver, and for the judicial system to deliver. What we can do, and what I want to do, and what I'm committed to doing, is to continue to share Dawn's story, to be present in those environments, to make sure that Dawn's incredibly beautiful face and vibrant smile are all over the place for all the world to see. And if it inspires any other advocate, whether you call yourself an advocate or not, to want to help, to want to participate, to want to help bring Dawn home, then that's another blessing that I would consider a success.
I love that. Bring her home. I cannot tell you how many times in talking to families who have loved ones who are missing, that and probably no more powerful one than the episode with Kimberly Loring, who's Ashley Loring, Heavy Runner's sister, where she made the point, like, justice isn't about someone being arrested or someone doing time for it. Justice is finding out what happened to my sister and bringing my sister home to the family where she belongs. And I think that, I think sometimes we think about cold cases and we get really excited when there's, an arrest or it's solved or DNA or genetic genealogy closes it. but like we forget about that step in between, which is like, I just want my sister, my mom, my brother home. And that's to me, that's something powerful. And Sherri, you came up with that hashtag. So I was going to ask you sort of like what your hope is for the case and what you think people can do to help.
In the beginning, I don't know about the rest of my family. I know I wanted justice. I wanted somebody to pay for it. And I think my mom did. Sam was so young. Denny was confused. My mom was heartbroken. I wanted justice. At this point, I've talked to my mom. I know a lot of people are going, and we're never really going to get the truth. I just want to bring my sister home.
Mhm.
I want to bring her home so that her children, my mom, and the rest of my family can have some closure. At this point, 29 years later, I don't even think the rest of it matters anymore.
Mm.
Just tell us where she is. Let us bring her home. Let us bury her. Let us have a chance to say goodbye.
Yeah, I
Just let
agree.
me. Just so many family members that didn't get a chance to know her.
Yeah.
And she didn't deserve this. She tried to do the right thing. And I tried to protect her, but she wanted to see her kids.
Yeah. I don't think you can beat yourself up too much for that. You did the best you could.
I have always.
I know. I just think you have to keep it in perspective that, we try to do the best we can for people with what we have and what we know in the moment. And sometimes what we know to do or how to do, we don't have all the tools. And then sometimes we do have all the tools in the world, but that at the end of the day, it's ultimately someone else's choice. And yeah, I mean,
I
you did
wish
the best you could.
I had known that they tried to get her back. I wish I had known. Because I would never have let her go. She'd still be here. So in part, I do and always will blame myself.
But Sherri, what are the odds she wouldn't have found her way?
No, she didn't have any money. She was living with me and we were broke. She wouldn't have had a way.
Oh.
We didn't have cell phones back then, but she found a way.
Sam, I'm going to turn it over to you to go ahead and close. And, Sherri brought up the point that so many family members didn't get to know her. And it sounds like you did get to know a little of your mom, but not a lot of her. And, I'm just curious what you're hoping for in all of this.
It's a tough question to answer because really, I guess I just want my mom, but it's not in the terms of just having her home. Like what I want out of this is something that is never going to be obtainable. Like I want to know her. I want to know who she was, and I'll never get that chance to know who she was. I get fragments from people, and that's about it. So I don't know what I want from this. Answers would be nice, but seems like we're jumping through hoops to get those from police, even. So, yeah, I don't closure. Maybe I just want to know who she was.
Mm. Yeah. I hear you. And hopefully through this process, like Sherri was mentioning, people have been reaching out. You can learn more about your mom. I just wanted to thank all three of you guys and wish you Godspeed on the search for answers. And Samm, for you to have the opportunity to just learn more about your mom, even if you can't get her back, and Sherri, for your healing and to bring your sister home. And Raul, I hope you take a nap sometime.
Right?
Could use one.
He
I could
does
use
need to
one.
sleep at some point.
You really do, man. Well, thank you all. I really appreciate it, guys.
Thank you.
You're
No,
welcome.
we thank you for actually spending all this time with us. I appreciate this.
Thanks for joining us for the second part of this conversation. If you'd like to join me and other listeners for discussions, we can be found on most social media platforms, including a listener-run Facebook group called the Silver Linings Fireside Chat. For deeper conversations with our guests and live conversations with other listeners, you can also join us on our Patreon at www.patreon.com/The Silver Linings Handbook. You can also find early and ad-free episodes there. I'm Jason Blair, and this is the Silver Linings Handbook podcast. We'll see you all again in a few days.